Hey guys, it's Ryan here with Hobbies and Man once again, and today we're doing another book chatter video. Today we're talking about The Wandering Inn. Once again, it's been quite a few months since I talked about The Wandering Inn, I think. If I remember correctly, I've read up to book 9, that is through the end of volume 5, right? So today we're talking about volume 4, which is books 4 and 5, right? If I remember correctly. Let me double check this. That would be the Last Light and the General of Israel, right? I think that's what it is. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. If it's not, please correct me down below, or I'll correct myself later. But it's the introduction of Luan and what's her name? Eiko and Ken, and then when Cell goes up to Magnolia, right? So all through that, and the return of Askarash properly, right? So whatever books cover that, that's what I'm talking about, right? So there's quite a few things that I wanted to talk about today in this video. I'm not going to list them out or anything, but we'll go through them one by one. I do want to come back to The Wandering Inn. I feel like it's been a while since I, talked about it. I really love the series, so I want to continue to talk about it. To that extent, I did reread through books 4 and 5 in order to make this video, because I had planned this out a long time ago, but in the ensuing months, I feel like I didn't really remember too much. As I was reading through the book, I did realize that I did actually remember quite a lot, but I still really love the way Pirate Abba writes the books anyways, so I kept reading through them and it just kind of skipped sections that I didn't quite like. So I skipped most of the Flos chapters, and I skipped all of the Clown chapters just because I don't really care about the storylines too much. And thankfully, there's not really much I want to talk about relating to them. But there are some interesting things to talk about right off the bat. So today, Daniel Greene made a video talking about the fantasy news stuff. One of the things that he talked about was Andrea Parsnau's departure from The Wandering Inn. I had already watched her initial video yesterday or the day before. I can't remember. I think it was Monday morning that I saw it. And so I found the video interesting. I appreciate Andrea Parsneau's work. I'm not someone that listens to the audiobooks. I prefer reading always. And I don't necessarily like audiobooks too much. So it's not like I have a real attachment or interest in Andrea Parsneau and her ability to read or anything, to do audiobook stuff. Or sorry, narrate, that's the word I was looking for, or anything like that. But I appreciate her work as an element that is meaningful to the growth of The Wandering Inn, right? And so her having to step down because she's burnt out and because she doesn't know if she can give more to the series is understandable. It's a bit sad, and I really, my heart goes out to her because she seemed really sad about this. And I think that that's really deeply understandable, right? And she kind of had these concepts about the fact that people might not understand burnout. I don't think so. I think most of us are intimately aware of what burnout is. Maybe we don't feel it the same way, but we definitely understand what that feels like. However, maybe there is a lack of empathy when it comes to burnout in the artistic sense. We might not really understand that too much, right? We don't get artist block or writer's block or stuff like this. In this case, Andrea doesn't really have that. I think Andrea's problem, as she defined it, was that she reached the edge of her skill set. Like she cannot come up with any more accents. She cannot find new voices, and she's kind of, reached her limit. And so someone else is going to take over after book 15, I think. And throughout the whole process, I was wondering why they did a full switch instead of doing like a group effort, right? Where Andrea would focus on Aaron and a few key characters, maybe, Aaron and the Antinium, because my understanding is that her Antinium voices are quite fun, and then have someone else supplant all of the other voices, right? And so they would have something collaborative. I guess that's because it's very difficult. That would involve kind of more like a team cast type thing, right? A kind of audio drama vibe that maybe isn't really what Pirate really wants out of her audiobooks, right? So maybe that's why this didn't happen. But I feel like if this is an issue that Andrea faced, this might be an issue that other artists or other narrators are going to face too, right? And so maybe at some point that is kind of the way to go, where you have multiple voice actors that provide voices for different groups of characters, right? And maybe this could be a way to include, you know, narrators that maybe wouldn't have been popular otherwise, or maybe wouldn't have gotten work otherwise, right? You know, in kind of a diversity effort, right? So maybe you could have like different people with different accents naturally from different regions of the world provide accents and things for different characters, right? That might be a way to go. I don't know if that's you know, the right thing to do or not, but that feels like an easy-ish way to fix it in terms of like, you know, how the readers would react to it. I don't know if it's really implementable in the right way, right? So those are my thoughts on that. That was kind of the first topic here. It was one I had not planned to talk about, but I thought it was relevant just because it was, you know, what happened here, right? Since I mentioned Daniel Greene as well, that was another topic that I had talked about, or that I had thought about quite a while back. So when me and Sam did our first Wandering In video, we did it a few days before or after Daniel Greene released his own Wandering In video. And, you know, at this point, I know that it's not really a relevant issue anymore. The Wandering In video that he did highlighted some issues that the Wandering In has that no longer are the case, because as of January, I think, Pirate Abba removed the old version of Volume 1 and added in the new version of Volume 1, the one that I've read, because I read it, I started reading Wandering In after she updated Volume 1 on the website, right? So all of the points that Daniel Greene made about the fact that the original, you know, edition wasn't really well written and stuff like that are basically, you know, irrelevant. And they were actually irrelevant when he made the video, because, and this is really what grinded my gears about that video, because I didn't really like what his thoughts were. Like, I understand the opinion aspect. Like, I can't tell him his opinion is wrong in general, right? But I could tell him, or I would have told him if, you know, I was someone that he would bother to talk to, that his opinion was wrong, because Pirate Abba and her team literally told him, hey, we have the updated version of the book. It's available for free. Read that version. And because of his dyslexia, or because he didn't really pay attention, or whatever the case may be, he didn't bother to actually read that version. He read the original audiobook and the original version that was available on Kindle at the time. And so his opinions were based on an outdated version of the book, right? And so I feel like maybe his opinion would have not changed all that much, but it would have definitely been much nicer and much better if he had read the, you know, proper edition, the one that Abba had put on her website, right? And so my kind of annoyance with Daniel Greene's video, the Wandering In video that he did, wasn't really about his opinion. It was about his lack of due diligence, I guess, because you know, whether you appreciate it or not, and whether Daniel, you know, agrees with this or not, he is the largest voice in the booktube community. And so anytime that he covers something, regardless of what it might be, no matter how popular it is, there will be a spike in interest in this thing, right? He can change the success rate of stuff, even if he doesn't say anything bad. If, you know, he has micro expressions that are bad, or, you know, any sort of kind of situation like that, might change people's opinions on works, because he's just that big of an influencer, right? And so him making a YouTube video about the Wandering In, reading the wrong version, and then sharing his opinions on that, and having them be negative, really feels like something that would have hurt the Wandering In. And I'm not sure if it did or not, but it really feels like a very thoughtless action on his part, and that bothers me, because, you know, when you have social power like this, you have to try your best to do you know, the right thing with it. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm trying to tell him that he did something wrong. Well, I am doing that, but I'm not trying to say anything about his character or anything like that. I'm just saying there was a mistake made. The mistake could have cost the Wandering In a lot, and I don't appreciate that he didn't bother to fix it. I don't think that he ever made a second video talking about it. I don't think that he really did anything about it. He did recently mention it, right? You know, like I said, but I'm not sure that he bothered to correct himself in any way. and that is not great in my opinion, right? So those are my thoughts on that. I just wanted to mention that because it's been months, right? Maybe nearly a year at this point since that video came out. And I still think about it every once in a while because it just grinds my gears that it's like, okay, this series is amazing, it's wonderful and stuff. And yes, there's problems with it, but those problems don't really exist anymore because this is not how the book is presented anymore. And he didn't bother to fix his opinion on it based on the proper version, right? So I don't know. Those are my thoughts on that. I don't know if you guys agree or disagree. Maybe I wasted my breath and your time for 5 minutes. I don't know. You guys tell me. But those are my thoughts on Daniel Greene's Wandering In video, the one he made quite a long while ago. I'll link it down below in case you guys have not watched it. I'm sure you have, but there you go. Now, the third topic that I had here today is the webcomic. Now, last time I made a video, I mentioned it briefly that the webcomic had started to come out. I think it did start to come out late in 2024, early 2025. And there was kind of this interesting build up to it where there was like, I can't remember if it was Chicago or some other city, but there was like a live action role-playing element to the unleashing of the fact that this was happening, right? It was kind of leading up to the fact that Erin had disappeared from her hometown. And there was QR codes that would lead to a web page that then would lead to the Wandering In comic book website, right? Which I'll leave down below. I think it's just literally the wanderingcomic.com, something like that. And I think that's cool. I really like that. I thought that was fun. I didn't participate in it. I wasn't really paying attention to it. I was down in Houston visiting family, and I wasn't really caught up with anything. Basically, when I go on vacation, I kind of lose the plot of what's going on in terms of the social media spheres, just because I'm not really having time to go on them as much. And I couldn't find that stuff again. I tried looking at the Wandering In Twitter. I tried looking at Pirate Abba's Twitter, and I couldn't find it. I wasn't really able to locate the stuff that I was talking about. And maybe I dreamt it up. I'm not really sure. I don't think so. But I remember that happening. I remember that the webcomic came out. And then I remember someone leaving a comment. I think their name was Sarul or something. I can't remember. They are someone that comments quite often in my Wandering In videos. And they said that the webcomic was kind of like a lifeless adaptation that wasn't really a webcomic, that it didn't really have the love behind it that, webcomics normally do. And that it was just a way to pad out the Patreon. And I read through what's available right now. It's 5 chapters, 13 pages of chapter 5. And I don't know if I agree. I don't know if I disagree either. I'm not someone that's going to really read the webcomic all that often. I will check in every couple months and read through it because I like supporting the Wandering In. And if me going on the website and, adding clicks to the website's count helps, that's good. I'm not someone that pays for Patreon. I'm honestly not even on the Wandering In Discord because I just don't really use Discord much personally. And so all of that extra, larger fandom stuff doesn't really matter to me. And so when I see the webcomic, I see that it's adapting Pirate Abba's work. It's doing it quite lovingly. I actually like the art style. Even though it's not necessarily my favorite, sometimes I feel like this is maybe a bit too like Tumblr girl kind of art style. The vast majority of the time, I quite like it. I think it's good. I love being able to see Erin and have her look like a person, right? She's a cartoon, but I enjoy that aspect, right? Seeing it come to life. And I like the colors. I think it's cool. It's really beautiful to see this story that I care so much about, that I really don't have any conception for in terms of visuals, come to life in this way, right? And I'm a big fan of comic books and manga, so I find a lot of value in, words plus pictures. And so even if it is kind of like a Patreon thing, because you basically get one page every 3 days or so, and if you want to read more, you have to pay for the Patreon, and you can only use the scrolling on the if you pay for the Patreon. So that stuff is like, I understand the point of that, right? It's annoying that you don't have access to all of the ways to read this book or this comic book unless you pay for it. At the same time, the main story is completely free. You can't expect everything that Pirate Abba does to be free. And broadly speaking, the comic book is definitely much more of a sink in resources than the novel is, because the novel is written by Pirate Abba. She is doing this, or they are doing this, basically out of love for their craft, and then they're also making money on the side based on that, right? But I don't necessarily know how much money Pirate Abba actually makes out of this. I don't necessarily know that they actually make that much money off of this. I can't remember if this is their full-time job or not. And so the comic book being something that requires Patreon stuff, that requires money being input from the consumer, makes sense to me. And I understand it, and I appreciate it, because the people that are working on this clearly love the series, whether you can see it or not. Otherwise, they wouldn't be working on it, right? Like, this is a fan initiative kind of situation, right? And these people need to get paid for all of their work. Pirate Abba probably doesn't make enough money to pay for a whole team of artists to work on that, right? And so she subsidizes it through the Patreon. That makes total sense to me, and I appreciate it. And I think that it's actually really great that she made this webcomic and that she's making use of the Patreon, because when the time comes, this can be the collectible item that tells us the Wandering Inn story. This can show up on stores and in shelves, and it can be printed and taken care of properly and well made and well loved. And this can show up in comic book stores, at Barnes & Noble and stuff like this, if Pirate Abba makes the process for this work properly. Because the webcomic is not actually organized like webcomic, in my opinion. It's organized like a proper traditional comic book. And so when the time comes, this can be collected in a trade paperback or a hardcover collection or something like that. And when that does come, when that does happen, when there are enough pages for this, I will be first in line to buy that, because there's no way I can buy 1 billion copies of all of Pirate Abba's books, right? They don't sell physical copies of them. They're too big. They have to be split into a bunch of smaller tomes. But a comic book removes a lot of the words that are necessary to, create this expansive stuff by having artwork instead. And so I feel like it's much more collectible. Now, maybe we'll only get the first book collected in comic book form, because otherwise I don't know how likely it is to get anything else adapted. But if that is the only thing we get, and we can buy it physically at some point, I will be deeply happy. And there's a lot of smaller indie publishers that focus on comic books that might be very willing to work with Pirate Abba to print this physically, right? There's Vault Comics specifically. They work with Atheon Books, or Atheon, I can't remember their proper name, but they work with them to create light novel versions of some of their novels, right? And they're even working on comic book adaptations of some of their novels. If that works, and Pirate Abba and Vault can work together to create some sort of special edition of the Wandering Inn comic book, I feel like that will be the start of the next stage of popularity for the Wandering Inn. If the Wandering Inn can start getting on physical shelves, this is when the Wandering Inn will grow beyond its limited kind of web, specific fandom, right? Now, is it really necessary that happens? No, I think that the Wandering Inn fandom is quite big. I think there's like millions of people that read it, right? But if we ever want to see an anime or a live action show or anything like mainstream come out of it, there has to be work done to make it available to the masses, right? People that are not looking for it, people that can just stumble across it, right? And I think the comic book is the way to do that. And so I actually really love what Pirate Abba is doing with this. I think that this is a great idea. Is it going to work properly? Maybe not. I don't know. But I think it's a great step. So I really, really appreciate that. So those are all of the Wandering Inn, like, meta topics. Now we're talking about the actual Wandering Inn Volume 4 topics here. So there's some stuff that I wanted to talk about that was relevant to Flos's work, right? So I didn't read it this time around, but I've read it about 2 or 3 times at this point. And the first kind of major topic that I want to cover here is stuff relating to Flos. So I didn't read those 7 chapters at the beginning of the last night this time, just because I don't really like them that much, but I have read them about 3 times at this point, right? And the kind of most interesting elements that come out of that are slavery as a concept in The Wandering End because we don't really see it in Israel. We don't see it in Terrandria either. We only really see it on Chandra, which I think is where Flos is, and we might see it to some extent in Rear as well, which are the two much more fucked up kind of continents, right? Baleros is fucked up, but I'm pretty sure Baleros has a very kind of clear, like, everyone is free, everyone fights, everyone exists individually, right? And you gather together to do things greater than what you can by yourself. Whereas Rear is like, we're fucked. We gotta do what we gotta do to survive. If that means enslaving each other, so be it, right? And in Chandra, there is a lot more, like it's not just war that exists in Chandra. It's like a more kind of like European kind of like, we're gonna fuck shit up until we own the continent, right? Kind of feeling. That kind of reminds me of like the Middle Ages, right? Like the Crusades and stuff like that. And even though slavery was kind of like not really the same in those time periods, the concept of taking over a land and then making those people that you now own or that you have now beaten be your laborers makes a lot of sense, right? This has been a thing that has happened in history forever, right? However, the Stitch people in Chandra seem to be much more in line with like American slavery, right? Like slave trade slavery, which is not the same as like ancient European, ancient Roman, you know, kind of like that sort of slavery, right? And so it's kind of weird because it's kind of unclear what sort of slavery we're really seeing. In some cases, it feels kind of like that Roman style slavery where it's like, okay, we just beat you, so you guys have to work for us now. Instead of, and then sometimes, especially with the Stitch people, it really feels kind of like the African American slave trade, which is really, really fucked up, right? Like that's really sad. And it's not really, like Trey really hates this concept. He really is unhappy about the fact that there is slavery. And as a modern person, I agree with him. But Trey and Teresa, or Tress, whatever her name is, are very bad at realizing that they don't exist in the modern world anymore, that they exist in a fantasy world, that they exist in a way, in a world where this is just how it is. You could change the future of the world eventually, but you can't do anything now. And these characters just don't appeal to me at all. And so even if I agree with their struggles and their plights, I just don't care because they don't seem appealing to me in any way. I don't find myself attached to Trey or Teresa. I really only care about Flos out of all of those characters because he's interesting. He's kind of like this like great Alexander the Great, kind of Odin, kind of like King Arthur type character, and I find that appealing. But Trey and Teresa are basically just there to give Flos new inspiration. They don't really feel like real characters to me, not in the same way that all of the other characters in The Wandering End feel. And so, yes, I understand Trey's point. I agree with him. Slavery is horrifying and disrespectful and deeply bad, but his anger, even though justified, feels so insanely useless. And he really is setting himself up for failure. And I just don't find that valuable in this book, if that makes sense. I don't know if that really clears anything up. I did like the conversation he and Ghazi had. You know, Ghazi is like, well, slavery is reality, and the only people that can break slavery are people of noble classes, right? Or in some way, people that have power over you, right? And so that's why Ghazi follows Flos, and I find that deeply valuable, right? Would Flos free any slave, or was it just Ghazi because he saw something in her, right? That's really what interests me about the slavery issue in The Wandering End. And I think this is, slave is the second like negative class that we've seen, because the first one was like Devourer or whatever, like the Wendigo girl, right, from Flowers of Esseltham. Slave is the other one. I don't know if there's anything else. I can't remember if Clown has like a negative race or not, because he has like an insanity class, right? Like, or like an insanity skill. that has like a different tinge to it. I don't know if that one counts. But, you know, I find the slavery question in The Wandering Inn interesting because it's something that we as modern people talk about in fantasy a lot, right? Like a lot of people have issues with how slavery is portrayed in a lot of fantasy books, right? And that's understandable, but also like for the vast majority of our existence, that has been like a fact of life. We can't really editorialize it away from our fantasy that's supposed to be based on like these historical time periods, right? So I don't know, I think it's interesting. The other stuff that relates to Flos that I found was cool was flat Earth. Apparently, Flos explains to Trey and Teresa that there are no planets surrounding the sun in the inner world. It is kind of like a flat plane. I don't know if that's true or not. I feel like it is. Like I feel like Flos explains that people have tried to go off the edge of the earth and they have fallen to their death, right? I can't remember if that's true or not. If that is the case, is the in-world a real place? Or is it like a dream? Like, did these people actually come from Earth to a real place? Or are they in some weird simulation? Like, what is going on? Like, that stuff is deeply interesting. And I actually kind of find it bad that it was introduced through Flos, because he is the least valuable character, in my opinion. Well, actually, Clown is worse. I don't like the Clown storyline at all. Although I find that one more interesting because of the psychological aspects. The Flos one is interesting because of Flos, but the side characters in it just don't work for me, right? And the fact that Flat Earth, as the reality that the Wandering Inn works in, was introduced there kind of sucks. At the same time, well, fuck, now I have to read all of the Flos chapters in case we get more information about that, right? So I thought that was cool. I don't know if it's based on like the Christian fundamentalist flat Earth that we have nowadays, or if it's based on like the Indian kind of like a flat Earth on a turtle on top of an elephant kind of concept. Either one would be kind of cool. I do like the idea of like a planet that has like this weird like ice like wall at the edge of it, and if you try to climb it, you die. That's cool. But I don't know if that's really how it works. At the same time, having the Wandering Inn world be on top of a giant turtle would be kind of cool too. So I don't know. I find the concept of that really valuable, because what is this world, right? Like, is it a real place? Is it a real planet? Or is it some weird made up thing that a bunch of gods and like different creatures from different worlds just decided to combine into and turn into like a thing, right? Like, what is the point of the in world if it's constructed? That's valuable. That's cool. I love that, right? And then I think there was something else regarding Flos that I thought was interesting, but I can't quite remember. There was okay, actually I do remember what it is. It ties into the next topic, which is classes and levels, right? So we learned through Flos that people should strive for one class, because a single class is stronger than multiple classes. It's kind of unclear why. I think in the concept of video games, one class is better than multiple classes because you can, as an individual, only reach a certain level of levels, right? You can only have 100 levels total. And so if you have multiple classes, that means multiple levels are distributed across those classes. That means that you are less valuable as a character because you cannot be 100, right? Level 100 in a single class because you have all of these other ones, right? And being level 100 in one class is more valuable than having 5 levels in 20 classes, right? Master of none, right? The kind of idea that you're a jack of all trades, right? I think that's what it's based on. It's not clearly defined, but Flos kind of implies this, right? Consolidation is important. Can you consolidate different skills, different classes, even if they're completely unrelated? Like, can I be a gardener and a soldier and become a plant warrior, right? Like, is that possible? What do I have to do in order to do that? Do people know this? That's kind of unclear. I think the answer is no. People don't know this, but there are some understandings, right? If you combine a tactician class or like a strategy class plus a sergeant class, you become a strategist quicker, right? You can consolidate easily through that, right? But those are kind of very related skills, and so it makes sense that they would consolidate into one, right? You can also be given a attribute to your class, right? If Lionette bestows her favor onto Krisha, Krisha becomes a royal seller, right? Instead of just a normal seller. So can like a druid take a normal like level 10 warrior and bestow upon them druid powers and make them a grass warrior, right? Like, is that possible? I don't know. I don't think so. I think you have to be like a noble class or like a leadership class, right? Because like warrior classes have leadership classes, and then noble classes are leadership classes, and they're different leadership types, right? Like one of them is a social leadership and the other one is a military leadership, but they can be kind of interchangeable in some ways, right? So I think you have to have like a leadership based class in order to provide classes to other people, right? And we see Lakin doing this quite often, right? But it seems like it's not really common knowledge that these things exist this way, right? Although Flos introduces us to this concept, and then everyone else after the Flos chapters kind of treats it as normal, understandable knowledge that everyone seems to know, right? I think Ryoka also independently finds it out, and then she tells Kalabako, and then from there, we kind of act like everyone knows what's going on. I don't think that that's true. And that's kind of one of the small kind of like writing tics that I dislike Pirate Abba having, which is like, okay, from the reader perspective, this makes sense, right? Everyone knows this information now because we know it. At the same time, you have to have scenes or kind of explain away in some way that these characters have learned this concept every time, because all of these characters are like separated by thousands of miles, right? And so you can't just kind of assume that they know this information. You have to have them learn it in some way, right? It can be a simple conversation. It can be a small recollection or something. I think that this is kind of one of the small failures of Pirate Abba here and there. It's not really a big deal at all, but it is something that I noticed a bit here in this case. But I might be wrong, right? I have read this story quite a lot. I've read more certain parts more than others, so maybe I've jumbled my knowledge here and there. But if that is the case, let me know down in the comments. I don't think so, but I could always be wrong. So there you go. And then there was this question that I had, which is, can rulers give themselves classes? Like, can Lakin say, you know what, Greene, you're not my paladin anymore. I'm going to be my own paladin. And then does that consolidate into a new class? Like, does Emperor suddenly become like War Emperor, right? Or Warlord or something like that? Like, do those sort of concepts exist? And how do classes become a thing, right? Because Aaron is a magical innkeeper. What requirement was that? And I think she's the first magical innkeeper, right? I know that there's been people that have had the first version of that class, right? What controls the game? What controls those things, right? That's really what I want to know. I'm sure we'll figure it out later. I don't want any spoilers, so don't tell me. Just let me know if it's something we learn or not, right? I think that's really cool. And then there was also something that the Antinium said here, which is Belgrade and Anand had talked about the fact that sometimes it doesn't make sense how chess gives them levels in strategy and then they can apply it to the real world, because it's not the same thing, right? And one of them, I can't remember who it was, I think it was Anand, says, if that is the case, then is the system that we live under broken? Because it's not correct. There is an error in the logic, right? And I really appreciate this. I think this is really, really cool. I think the answer is that no, there isn't an error. It's just that these characters have not had the level of abstraction necessary to realize that this is possible, right? I know that in ancient times, chess or satranj or whatever you want to call it was used to try to learn how to, navigate thought process, because chess is about learning strategy. It's about learning how to think multiple steps ahead, right? It's not really about learning how to manage armies, although that is valuable in some ways as well. You could learn that from chess, but it's not about that. It's about managing resources. It's about the mathematics of strategy, right? Like, that's what chess is about. I can't remember who it was. I think it was a teacher I had in high school who was really into chess. He would talk about the fact that kids that would play chess would show a marked improvement in their analytic ability. And so they would do better at math than other people if they played chess and if they took chess quite seriously, because chess taught them pattern recognition. And that's what math is, right? It's pattern recognition and then application of those recognitions, right? And so is chess directly leading to them learning how to use their army? No. But chess is giving them the abstract knowledge necessary to understand where they need to place their warriors, right? And I think that's what the leveling system is trying to give them, right? And so it's not broken. I just don't think the characters have enough abstraction necessary to understand this, right? It's kind of like how we don't really have the abstraction necessary yet to learn or to understand quantum mechanics properly, right? So that's kind of what I'm feeling here. I could be wrong there, so we don't know. And then the Antinium also talk about the return to Rear. They are kind of this expeditionary force that went away from Rear to try to build up their power base to try to return. But the queens have given up at this point. They don't want to go back anymore. They don't care anymore. They're just going to continue to live their existence here. And so if the queen have given up, except for the Free Hive, does this mean that all of the characters that are constantly wondering about the fact that the Antinium are the deepest danger that they've ever faced and that they will ever face are just wasting their time? Will Caleb and then Cern and Priver and Tresk and all of these other characters manage to change the mind of their queens? And if they do, is there going to be a third Antinium war, right? Like, we haven't had World War III in the real world, and that's what the Antinium wars are supposed to represent in the in-world. Will we see that happen, right? Will we see that third world war on Israel, right? I think that yes. I don't know if it'll happen against the Antinium, right? I think it's going to be another kind of like Necromancer war if it ever comes to that, right? I think that's pretty cool. I love the concept of Caleb and Cern thinking about the fact that they could take Aaron with them down to Rear, and how that could change things, and that how that can make them better. And I also wonder, can the Antinium become drowned men? Because the weakness that the Antinium have is that they can't breathe underwater. But Antinium are bug people, right? Bugs are similar to crustaceans. Crustaceans seem to be what the drowned men turn into, right? The carcinization, right? Everything eventually turns into a crab. Can the Antinium either create themselves a new variant that breathes water, that is a crustacean, that is crab-based or lobster-based instead of ant-based, or can they do whatever was necessary for the drowned men to exist to themselves so that they can become drowned Antinium, right? Like, is that possible? I think Kissenver has something that allows him to breathe underwater, right? I know he has a ring that lets him fly or jump high. I think he also got one that allows him to breathe underwater because Ryoka gave it to him, right? And a lot of people in the inn were like, oh, this is concerning, right? Like, she gave him something that nullifies the only real weakness that the Antinium have, right? And I don't know. I just think the Antinium are the coolest thing in the inn world. I really love them. And I want to see them go back to Rear. I want to see Erin's pirate adventure as she travels to Rear with all of the Antinium, and she finds what the hell there is there, and she like makes the Wandering Inn in Rear. I think that'd be funny as fuck. I don't know why. I would just really enjoy that. Like, can you imagine the Blighted King shows up to the Wandering Inn? He's like, yo, what the fuck is this? I've only ever seen death and destruction and demons, and then this crazy little chaotic woman shows up and she's giving me fucking pizza. Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I think that would be really, really fun, right? So, I don't know. Those are my thoughts on that. I think I've mentioned this before, so there really isn't anything new here. Otherwise, the last kind of two concepts here are, I like the way the Wandering Inn kind of sneaks in this kind of interesting detail. And I don't know if you guys agree with me or not, and I think it's fine if you don't agree, because, I might be wrong. But I feel like most of the made humans have like a game type that they're playing, right? Like, Aaron is playing a general RPG game that occasionally has quite like Dark Souls-esque levels, right? Where Ryoka is playing like a side scroller or like a Temple Doom, or like a Temple Run kind of game, like a Subway Surfers game. She's kind of just running, right, in different places. And then she gets cutscenes, which is when she's not running, and then she continues to run. And every time she's running, she's either running from something, she's trying to attack something. Like, That's what that feels like, right? Lakin is playing like Clash of Clans, basically, or like a real-time strategy game, right? He's like playing Civ 5, basically, something like that. And that's pretty fun. Where Geneva and the team that are playing, in Beleros are basically playing like a Call of Duty first-person shooter type game, or something like a Dark Souls game, where it's just like constantly death is upon them at all times, right? With like this weird political subset that is going to eventually start happening, right? Because they created the United Nations company, right? And then Trey and Teresa are playing like a visual novel, basically, because they don't really do anything. They just kind of talk with Flos, right? And so that feels like a visual novel to me. I don't play any video games, so these kind of analysis might not be correct. If you were to say, what these characters are playing, if you were to equate their experience in The Wandering End to a video game, what would you call it? Like what is your opinion on that? I think I did pretty good here. But I don't know like all of the names, right? Like I don't really know what a MOBA is or what a roguelike is, like these sorts of concepts. And so I can't really apply them properly, but I think that I did a good enough job here with this, right? And then the last point here is Brunkr's death. That was kind of like the big meaningful death of this book. I'm still kind of upset about it. I mentioned it in my review. I don't really like that he died when he did, because it's valueless. There is no value in it. Brunkr was not a meaningful character. It's not someone that you loved. It's not someone that you cared about all that much. Brunkr was a small antagonist, and then someone that Eren tried to care for. But it's not like we saw them interacting all that much, right? Brunkr did not become a relevant person. He was only just starting to when Regrica cut him down, right? And so what I feel like is Pirate Abba needed a big, meaningful, moment to happen so that they could turn on Regrica, and it makes sense. But she didn't really want to sacrifice any of the really valuable characters, right? Like Ryoka or Eren and stuff like that. And so Brunkr was the way to go. The thing is that I feel that she cut Brunkr's life too short, too fast. Now, there is an element of that's life. Sometimes people are cut down before their time. And that's kind of the sadness of it, right? That is why you should understand Brunkr's death and find value in it, right? At the same time, though, that's not really how fiction works, per se. If a character is going to be cut before their time, they have to be very meaningful to the reader, right? It has to mean something. Like Ned Stark dying means something because you think that he's this great guy. You've spent a whole season learning that he's this beautiful, honorable man, and that he's basically the only good person in the whole world, and then he dies because he couldn't be bad, right? He couldn't lie. That's meaningful, that's deep, that sucks, right? He spent a long time with the young wolf, right? With him. As he gains a wife, he spent a lot of time trying to live up to his father's name and honor. And then he gets cut down when he finally gets some happiness out of this horrible, 3-season long situation where he's been trying to figure out how to be a leader, right? That sucks. Brunkr is in the same kind of vein as this character, as the young wolf. I can't remember his name. I'm so sorry. And yet, Brunkr had so much less development compared to these other characters in the Game of Thrones. And so when he dies, you have a moment of oh shit, that sucks. And then it doesn't really matter too much, right? Because he's not real. You didn't develop a deep relationship with this character. And so what it feels like is a waste of life or a waste of character. And it's also just deeply petty, but not in a way that's dark and satisfying, because even Brunkr, Regrica was asking him, are you valuable to Eren? And he's like, not really. I would love to be, though. And then she's like, oh, so you mean something to her. And then she cuts him down. That's clearly meaning that he's not valuable to Eren, right? So Eren doesn't care that much. I mean, she cares because she's a very empathetic person, but we know that he doesn't matter that much to Eren. And so his death feels kind of valueless, right? And so I just don't like that he ended it, because I feel like a Null Knight would have been such a better use of him, and it would have been awesome if he became a knight for the Wandering Inn, than whatever happened to him, right? Just becoming a dead character. So I just feel like a waste, because I was finally starting to like him, and then he gets cut down, right? So I don't know. Those are my thoughts on that. Let me know what you think. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. I will be back with another Wandering Inn video at some point in the next month or so. Maybe sometime in June. I'm not really sure, because the Wandering Inn videos that I make take a long time. Even if they're really just me talking about the story, it takes a lot to really get there, right? There's a lot of recording and a lot of editing. So I'll hope to get another one soon, but you know, give it a month or so. And thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said, I really appreciate it, and see you guys later.